my name is Catherine Walsh. I'm a clinical dietitian at the IWK Health Center Women's Site. Today I'm going to speak to you about gestational diabetes and diet. And I'm going to help you understand where to find carbohydrate in your diet so that you can control your blood sugars well as you go through having gestational diabetes. And you and your baby can be very healthy. First of all, we've got lots of resources on our webpage. So I encourage you to find these resources on our IWK Gestational Diabetes webpage. You'll find a variety of different resources, including our healthy eating plan for women with gestational diabetes. There's also some snack lists, and there is some protein ideas. There's a sample menu and a few other resources that will help you plan your meals. So sample menu. So let's first take a look at where we find carbohydrate in the diet. So we generally recommend that women who have gestational diabetes take about 3 meals per day, spaced about 4 to 5 hours apart. So we generally recommend that you stick to consistent times with your meals. So we ideally would recommend that you take a breakfast 7 to 8 o'clock, a lunch from 12 to 1, and supper around 5 to 6. And perhaps a small snack in between your lunch and your supper, as well as your breakfast and your lunch, if you need the snack. We also recommend that a night snack may be helpful for your blood sugars in the morning. If a person goes too long without eating overnight, it may allow your liver to release more sugar. So we recommend that a person who has gestational diabetes take a small snack before bed. Perhaps something like a glass of milk, or could be a half a sandwich, or maybe some fruit with a bit of yogurt. There's a lot of different snack options, and we generally recommend that you experiment with your snacks to see what might work. But we also do have a snack list available on our webpage, so we would encourage you to check out some of those choices. We like to look at the healthy plate. This is just one example. There's a number of healthy plate that you can find, especially if you go to Diabetes Canada, diabetes.ca. Check out various different plates, but we'll just point out to this plate where we would find the carbohydrates in the diet. And we would see food groups: grains and starches, fruit. Find carbohydrate in things like milk and milk products. We'll discuss some of the portions here in a minute. We recommend that your meal plate look balanced, such as this one that I'm holding, where half your plate is consistent of free vegetables, and we'll go through what some of those are, but they generally are the salad and stir-fry type vegetables, and that would be about half your plate. To the starches and grains, we recommend that fulfill about 1/4 of your plate. A serving of milk at your meal, as well as a serving of fruit. Now this amount of carbohydrate, each food group represents about 15 grams of carbohydrate for a portion, which I'll show you in a second. But if we say that these food groups contain carbohydrates such as fruit, grains and starches, and milk, they would each contain about 15 grams of carbohydrate for each serving. Now, we don't have any carbohydrate found in protein foods such as meat and fish and chicken, eggs, cheese, nuts and seeds and so on. They are generally low in carbohydrate, as are the free vegetables that I pointed out earlier. We don't have carbohydrate in tea or coffee, but we recommend that you be moderate with your tea and coffee consumption for reasons other than carbohydrate, and we also don't recommend that you add sugar to your tea or coffee. We also don't find carbohydrate in fat as well, and but we do encourage you to have with meals because it can help stabilize your blood sugars and help give you satiety, as well as lots of different nutrients. So having said that, we recommend about 3 healthy well-balanced meals that look like this plate. Let's take a look at some of the different grains and starches that we might find that would fit into this 1/4 of the plate. So we have another healthy plate here, like this one, and you can see that we could put different portions of the grains and where they would fit, and I have a few behind me, so let's take a look. Maybe this half a slice of pita bread would be considered one portion. This would be a half a cup of pasta, whether it's enriched pasta or whole grain pasta, either is fine. We generally recommend that you stick to the portion, which would be, in this case, 1/2 cup, and we said 1/2 of the pita. This would be oatmeal. This would probably be about 1 cup of oatmeal, and that's probably about 2 portions of grains, just so you know. And it's quite dense. You can see how dense it is, so it may be more in carbohydrate than 1 portion. Although we can talk about reading labels in a minute. This would be a serving of rice, and you can see there's a few lentils in this rice serving. So that would be 1 serving. It's generally about 1/3 to a half a cup. If it's about 1/4 of your plate, you're doing well. Potatoes also would be considered a starch. Even though they're a vegetable, there are some starchy vegetables, and we would park them here in this part of the plate. So this is about 1/2 of a baked potato, or you could do 1 scoop of a mashed potato. 1 slice of bread is generally 1 grain as well, and we do recommend whole grain products as much as possible to help with your blood sugars. This is a serving of rice without anything in it. It's just a white rice. You can have white rice, you can have a brown rice, or parboiled rice. Different rices. Generally just recommend that you stick to the portion and you should be okay. Sticky rice and very processed rice like minute rice might be a problem for your sugars. Here's a serving of macaroni, so this would be a half a cup. So this is an example of 1 serving. If we were to go with Kraft Dinner, for example, this would be about one whole cup, so that would be 2 servings. You can see it takes up more than 1/4 of your plate. This wrap may be about 1 serving, but it depends. Wraps vary in sizes and shapes, so it's always really good to read the label. So we'll find a label to read for you. Bagels tend to be very carbohydrate rich, and they can be very dense, so you can see how dense the bagel can be. We generally recommend you stick to 1 bagel and see how your blood sugars are after that. Sometimes 1 full bagel can be too much for your blood sugars, and we encourage you to experiment, and preferably whole grain bagels. Here's some brown rice, so that's a serving of brown rice, and it should be able to fit well within your 1/4 of the plate. You like pancakes? There are certain pancake recipes that are very high in protein that your dietitian can give you some recipes for. Generally though, pancakes, because they are a refined flour and have some sugar in them, we only recommend as a small portion, so perhaps you could have 1 or 2 of these with some other parts of your meal. Okay, so those are generally the grains and starches. Well, I'll just add to that, the servings, they have squash, that's probably about 2 servings of starchy vegetable, and the corn here is about 1 serving. We generally don't want you to go with, say, rice and corn and very starchy things in addition to fruit. That may be more carbohydrate than your body is able to handle during pregnancy. Here's some sweet potato. This is a portion of sweet potato, so you can just see the different portions there for starches and grains. So that's your starches and grains. Each one of those, 1 serving, when you see in our meal plan booklet, would have about 15 grams of carbohydrate. And the amount of carbohydrate at a meal for most pregnant women is about 30 to 45 grams of carbohydrate per breakfast, and for lunch it's about 45 to 60. That can vary for every individual, so it's really good for you to experiment with your meals and to test your blood sugar after to see how your blood sugars are doing with the amount and the portions that you're using. So having said that, we can move now on to the fruit choices, which would be somewhere out here. Let's take a look at some fruit. This would be an example of a fruit serving. This is a peach. We could say this is an apple, and that would be one serving. So one fruit serving per meal, and generally it's best to stick to, we advise sticking to about 3 servings of fruit per day. I often recommend that you put some protein along with your fruit to stop the sugar from increasing so quickly. Here's some more fruit. Here's some prunes, healthy for your bowels. Strawberries and berries are excellent sources of fruit, and generally you can have a bit more, so you can see that you can have about 2 cups of strawberries. This is more than less than 2 cups, but you can have about 2 cups for a portion. That would also be equivalent to the other fruit portions that I showed you. Bananas and other tropical fruit tend to increase your sugars somewhat more, but again, you have to experiment with them. So try and see what works best for you around fruit. Just keep it to a moderate portion, as I said, 3 per day and 1 serving per meal. And these are some of the suggested portions of fruit. Grapefruit and some pear. These are just some examples. And raisins, a small serving of raisins there. Dried fruit can cause high sugars, so sometimes watch that and do have them maybe with some nuts, some protein. We don't generally recommend juice with gestational diabetes because it's very concentrated, it doesn't have any fiber, and it tends to make people's blood sugars increase quickly. So, we recommend that if you want to, you could try having just a small splash of juice, even much less than this, or cut up some fruit in your water, or you could also use some, there are products that have sugar substitutes in them, such as this one from Sobeys and Flavor. But also water is always a good choice, and in our book and our resources, we give you some options for low carbohydrate beverages. So we are talked about starches, we've talked about fruit. We're going to move on to the free vegetable section here. So we would want you to fill your plate, ideally with things like peppers, mushrooms, carrots, cut up tomatoes, any greens, broccoli. There's a whole list of free vegetables, what we call free because they don't have a lot of carbohydrate. So consult that list and make sure that you have lots of free vegetables, and you can eat them whenever you want throughout the day without any concern for your carbohydrate. We also encourage you, if you want to have them with a bit of dip or some protein, that also complements them and makes you feel more satisfied and also gives you a little bit of fat and protein. So lots of vegetables. Remember that. Have your plate, when you're hungry for more grains or starches, have more of the free vegetables. We're coming now to the section on protein. So protein is very helpful. Remember that plate as well. Protein helps to make your blood sugars not increase so sharply when you have gestational diabetes. So we would encourage you to have some protein along with every meal. It doesn't need to be a lot of protein, but it should show up at your meal and your snacks. So we can use some examples of protein, such as eggs would be an example of a protein. This is just half an egg, but you could have certainly 1 to 2 eggs for a meal. We would say some chicken leg. Now, if there's any breading on your meat, we would want you to count it as a starch, so don't forget about that. There is some, you could have some turkey. There are beans. Sometimes beans have some sweetness in them, so be careful and do watch the portion, generally half a cup, maybe 3/4 of a cup would be a serving. We could have a hamburger here. This is just ground beef, so that would be a serving. We have some sliced roast beef. We have cottage cheese. We have maybe some fish, some haddock or salmon. These are great protein choices. If you want to go a little more plant-based, look for things like lentils and maybe some chickpeas and different nuts and different seeds, peanut butter. These are all examples of nice protein that are plant-based. And finally, don't forget about tofu, which is a great source of protein, also a really good source of iron and calcium. So those are some ideas for, and I forgot one protein here, cheese. So lots of people like cheese, so enjoy a couple of ounces of cheese. This is 1 ounce. So make sure you put some of these proteins along with the starch or the fruit that you're going to choose in your meal. I think I've covered all of the protein. There is maybe some pork chop, or again we have some sliced meats. We don't really recommend deli meats in pregnancy unless they're heated to steaming hot. So be careful, because there is a foodborne illness that you want to avoid when you're pregnant. Okay, next we're going to talk a little bit about milk products. Now, you don't have to take milk. It is an option for you, but if you're going to choose some milk, do know that it does have some carbohydrate or some natural sugar in it, just as fruit does. So you can see that this is a serving of milk, so you could have skim, 1%, 2%, full fat milk in the quantity of 250 milliliters. That is the ideal portion for a meal, and it would also give you about that 15 grams of carbohydrate. The same with yogurt. This is plain yogurt. You can have plain yogurt in this portion. You can also have fruit yogurt, and you can also have Greek yogurt. We recommend that all yogurts are fine in about this portion, but we just don't recommend the sugar added yogurts such as, say, chocolate cream pie yogurt. Those can be too sweet, and we just recommend that you have such a serving of yogurt as plain Greek or fruity yogurt or calorie reduced yogurt. They're all fine in about this portion. Generally will give you about 15 grams of carbohydrate. So having said that, we've reviewed most of the food groups. So just so that you're aware, most women, if you'll recall, do well with about 45 grams of carbohydrate at a meal. Sometimes it's a little less, sometimes it's a little more. But we would recommend that you stick to no more than, say, 45. So this would be 15 if we were going to choose the macaroni here, or we could choose our rice, and this would be about 15. If we had some a peach, that would be 30 grams. And then if we added 1 serving of milk to that, that would be 45. We could add some vegetables and some protein, and that's about 45 grams of carb for your meal, which is roughly the amount that most people are able to manage when they have gestational diabetes and are pregnant. Okay, so we've covered lots of stuff. We've covered some different portions. We've covered the balance in your diet, and a little bit on the grams of carbohydrate, something we call carb counting. When we look at a label, and let's take a look at a label. If we have this bread, for example, this bread, or if we have this wrap, we can see how much carbohydrate might be in something when we read a label. So here's one example of a label. We'll just choose this bread. We'll do a couple of labels. So this will be a 14-grain bread, and again, I'm not advertising for any company, but we would look first at the label and say the serving size is the most important thing to look for first, and we'll see this for the nutrition facts. It's 1 slice of bread. Halfway down we can find the carbohydrate here, and it says it is 18 grams of carbohydrate. We don't look at the percent, we just look at the grams of carbohydrate in reference to that 45 grams for your meal. A nice bonus, if the product has some fiber in it, you can reduce the fiber from the carbohydrate. So this product has 3 grams of fiber in it and 18 grams of carbohydrate. So we can say 18, take away the 3 grams of fiber, and that's going to give us 15 grams of carbohydrate for this one slice of bread. That's how you read a label with when you're looking at carbohydrate and gestational diabetes. Here's another example of a label. This is a sprouted grain bread that you can get in the grocery store in the health food section in the freezer. This has 1 slice of bread is the serving, and halfway down is the carbohydrate, 17 grams of carbohydrate, and it has lots of fiber, 5 grams of fiber. 17 take away 5 is 12 grams of carbohydrate for this serving of sprouted grain bread. That's how you read a label. We don't give a whole lot of advice on sugar. It can be a little confusing. Generally though, if I'm to give you a teaspoon of sugar, that's like giving you 4 grams of sugar in that teaspoon. So if you choose a product that has more than 4 grams of sugar, then that would be a one of for the day. And if you can try and be mindful to check your labels for sugar, you can find sugar in things like such as bread and anything in a bag or a box or something that is a prepared food, or we can call it processed food. It's always good to look at the label. So for example, some granola bars have about 10 grams of sugar, and that's okay as long as it's just a one of for the day. You can also find sugar in prepared meals. You can find it in ketchup. You can find it in salad dressings. There's lots, and of course sweets, so you can look at the label and just see how much sugar. An example, pop would have a lot of teaspoons of sugar in it, so we ask you to be mindful and choose like a diet pop if you're going to have any, and really keep the regular pop to none, or on a very limited occasion, or perhaps when you're not feeling well and not able to eat. So that's the story on sugar, and I just want to stress the importance of that balanced, healthy plate again, and understand that the servings of fat would be maybe some butter or margarine, or bacon would be another example of a fat, and here is some butter or margarine, olive oil, could be maybe coconut oil. There would be nuts and seeds would be, as well as protein. There are also sources of fats, coffee cream, sour cream. These are things that you can enjoy with your meals in moderate amounts with the fat. So enjoy those. And with regard to the coffee or tea, generally one medium size coffee from a coffee or tea outlet would be acceptable. You wouldn't want to go with too much of the coffee or tea due to the caffeine and risk of miscarriage. We've covered most everything with regard to the food and the food groups. A little bit on sugar. We do advise that you limit the sugar as much as you possibly can in your diet, and that will help your blood sugars. So things like honey, agave, maple syrup, those things can also increase your blood sugars. So you can experiment a little with them, but you will find that you won't be able to either have them at all or perhaps a small amount. You to take a little bit of activity after your meal or in the evening to help your blood sugars in the morning. So we generally recommend that you take a little bit of walking, do some kind of activity. There's lots of suggestions in one of the physical activity resource that's on our webpage. So go and consult the ideas there for you. So activity, very important, and that's very helpful for keeping your blood sugars in control as well. Now, we recommend that your doctor has asked you to come and see us. So whether that is in person or whether it's through this video, it's very important to follow up with the dietitian with your blood sugars and your blood sugar readings. So your nurse will be providing education on how to test your blood sugars, and we would wish for you to complete a food record that looks like this. So we're going to ask you to fill it out based on the day. So if today is Thursday, we would write in the date, and we would write in what we're eating: breakfast, lunch, supper, and then maybe some snacks and your night snack as well. It's important to note that the night snack can help your blood sugars in the morning. I mentioned that earlier, so do try a little night snack of some carbohydrate and a bit of protein, and experiment with those to see what works best for your blood sugars. We would recommend that you put your blood sugars on this food record and send the information by email to the dietitians, and I'll give you the email for you to send to us. Do note that email is not 100% secure, and that there is a policy that we adhere to at the IWK with regard to virtual care or email care. So you can find that information on the website as well. You can certainly welcome to book an appointment to see us, or you can do a phone call appointment with us as well. But we would like to hear from you after you're given your diagnosis of gestational diabetes. We would like to hear from you after about 1 week, and this is how you report in with what you're eating and what your blood sugars are. Having said that, I will just remind you to go to our webpage and look for all of the great resources and meal planning and questions and answers on gestational diabetes. To go to IWK Gestational Diabetes, search that term, and you will come up with our webpage, and you can find much more there with regard to resources and meal planning and so on to help you and your family care for your gestational diabetes. Thank you very much.